So during the Jets versus Raiders game, there was a pretty interesting update brought by Melissa Stark's sideline reporter that Aaron Rodgers' goal is to return in mid-December, which would be pretty wild. And she also said this: he told me he has been working on a weight-limiting treadmill, jogging with 50% of his body weight. His goal this week is 75%. He said he could drop back and cross over. He's just got to be able to get up on his toe. He has to get off his heel to start running. And so if that happens, if Aaron Rodgers is actually able to return from an Achilles injury, what would that be, about 3 or so months after suffering it? That has to be one of the quickest Achilles tear recoveries of all time. And so I would love to see that happen. I would love if Aaron Rodgers is able to somehow return mid-December, because who doesn't want to see Aaron Rodgers playing football, especially with the way this Jets offense has looked this season without him. It's tough to watch Jets games because they can't really score. It's tough to score. And when you get Aaron Rodgers out there, obviously things would likely at least start moving in the right direction with this Jets offense, and maybe with this defense, give them the chance to really do something. I still wonder, with Rodgers in this recovery, can he actually return in mid-December? Who knows? But if that's a possibility, that's awesome to hear. I really hope to see it and hope he returns. My question is, when you look at this Jets team, they're currently 4-5 after losing to the Raiders, and they have a pretty tough schedule for the next few weeks. They have the Bills, the Jets, the Falcons, the Texans, and then the Dolphins. So that's a pretty tough stretch of games for the Jets, and I really just wonder, let's say, for example, if Rodgers is actually able to return mid-December. He's fully good to go. The doctor's clear, and the Jets are like, awesome, this is amazing. But they're sitting at, 4 and whatever that would be, 4-9, 5-9, something around there. Is it really worth throwing Rodgers out there behind a very weak offensive line if you're not even really, having a chance to make the playoffs? And maybe the only way he comes in is if they're still in the playoff hunt, because if they're not, I still think they want to see Rodgers as their quarterback next year, no doubt. They traded for him. They traded draft capital. They gave him, a ton of money. And so I think to risk Rodgers' health, if your chances of the playoffs are very slim, it's a pretty unwise move in my opinion. And it could have to do with how the Jets play the next few weeks if Rodgers was actually able to return, if they'd actually let him go out there, because I just don't think it would be a wise move to put Rodgers out there if you have a slim chance of making the playoffs. Now, if you're able to somehow win some of those games, which I don't know how that would happen with the way this Jets offense is playing. I don't know how they're going to beat the Bills, even though the Jets have a great defense. The Dolphins, it's just tough when your offense doesn't score points. And I think there are tons of issues with the offense. It's not just Zach Wilson. And honestly, watching him against the Raiders, it feels to me like the Jets are sort of holding Zach Wilson back in some different areas. I do question Nathaniel Hackett and his play calling. It seems like they're just, they don't expect the best from Zach Wilson. And I get it. He hasn't played great. There's no doubt about that. He had a bad interception to seal off the game for the Jets. But it feels to me like watching Zach Wilson, he can make those throws. He can make deep throws. The first couple of drives against the Raiders, he was honestly making some nice throws. The Jets were moving the ball down the field. They were passing it, sort of being aggressive. And then it felt to me like they got less aggressive. They started running the ball a lot more. Breece Hall only had 2.2 yards per carry. And there were so many different penalties, drops, things like that really, held this offense back. Zach Wilson had a nice pass to Garrett Wilson on one play in the first half. Garrett Wilson drops it. There were so many different moments where they had a nice play and it gets called back for a penalty. It had to be like 4, 5, 6 different times. And so while Zach Wilson is definitely part of the problem, he's not the whole problem in my opinion. I think play calling is an issue. I also think, the penalties are an issue. I also question the receivers outside of Garrett Wilson, because it feels like Garrett Wilson is the only guy really doing a lot for this Jets offense. And so the real question is can the Jets actually stay afloat if Rodgers is able to return mid-December? And honestly, my guess would be no. With the way this offense is playing, they haven't scored a touchdown in 11 straight quarters, which is just a wild stat to see. And so I think it would be entertaining if the Jets somehow found a way to win, to have Rodgers come back, because I think all of us would enjoy watching that happen. But right now, I'm just not so sure that will be the case. And we'll sort of see if the Jets are willing to put Rodgers out there if they're not really in the hunt for the playoffs, because why risk your quarterback's injury, for next season if, you just don't really have much of a chance. But that's the update. Those are my thoughts. If you want more NFL content like this, feel free to subscribe down below.